She walked out the door, but not before leaving one final bombshell. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I knew exactly who she was. But then, the message arrived. Her secret was about to be exposed, and it wasn't just any secret. What she told me next shattered everything. My world, destroyed in an instant. The truth? Unbelievable. You won't believe what happened when I finally found out who she'd been hiding all along. I never thought I'd be the guy whose life fell apart slowly, like a cracked foundation hidden under layers of fresh paint. But that's exactly what happened to me. At first, everything seemed fine, comfortable even. A marriage, a career, a life that looked good on paper. But there's something unsettling about the way things can slowly drift, like the tide pulling a boat further from shore when you're not paying attention. It all started innocently enough. I thought my wife was just distracted. She worked late often, caught up in her projects. But I didn't think much of it. After all, she'd always been dedicated to her job. But soon, it wasn't just the long hours. Her phone, always attached to her hand, became a barrier between us. I found myself wondering what she was hiding behind that screen. And then the signs began to stack up, one after the other, like dominoes waiting to fall. I couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, after she came home late as usual, I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at her, asking the one question I'd been too afraid to ask. What's really going on? Her response was a bit too quick. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and she barely met my gaze. Just work stuff, she said. But something about it didn't sit right with me. That's when I knew. Something wasn't just off. It was wrong. I didn't know exactly what, but I had the nagging feeling that I was losing her. The idea that she might be cheating hadn't crossed my mind at first. I trusted her. We'd been together for so long, and the thought of her being with someone else, especially behind my back, felt impossible. But the more I watched, the more I noticed. Subtle things at first. The way she spoke about friends at work, the sudden distance, the late nights with clients. But then it escalated. I won't say I found hard evidence yet, but the signs were everywhere, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. The constant excuses. The way she'd smile at her phone, cheeks flushed, like she was hiding a secret that no longer felt like a secret. But here's where it gets strange. I never confronted her. Never asked outright if she was seeing someone else. Instead, I did something I never thought I would. I started playing the same game. I began being distant too, going out at odd hours, ignoring her calls, pretending to be someone I wasn't. And just when I thought I had a grip on everything, that's when things started to get really interesting. Because she didn't know, but I was already on the hunt. I had a plan. The kind of plan you only see in movies. The kind where you let them dig their own hole, and then you let them fall in. The days dragged on in a blur of half-truths and silence. Every time she left for work, a nagging feeling gripped me. Something was off, but I couldn't pinpoint it. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just stressed. But soon, the signs were hard to ignore. Her phone, always in her hand, became a barrier between us. Every time I tried to get close, she'd quickly swipe it away. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew something had changed. It wasn't until I overheard her one night that I started to really question things. She was on the phone, her voice low, soft laughter filling the space. I stood in the hallway, straining to catch the words, but I didn't need to hear the details. The tone, the playful teasing, wasn't for me. It was for someone else. My heart sank. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny it either. I needed proof, but I wasn't going to ask her. If I did, she'd just lie. I had to be patient, play it cool. I started keeping track of her schedule, noticing more inconsistencies, late meetings, sudden trips she didn't mention. But it wasn't until I followed her one night that everything began to unravel. She left the house earlier than usual, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I quietly got into my car and tailed her at a safe distance. She stopped at a small restaurant. My heart pounded as I watched her get out of the car and walk inside. But she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man I didn't recognize. His hand was on hers, and they were talking closely, laughing together. It wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. My stomach twisted. I didn't need more evidence, but I couldn't stop myself from staying, watching from the shadows. I drove home that night. The image of her with him burned into my mind. I hadn't seen anything explicitly, but the signs were all there. And now I had to ask myself, what now? Should I confront her, or let it play out longer? The tension was unbearable. But I knew this was just the start. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the scene over and over in my head. Her, laughing with him, his hand on hers. It was a gut punch. I had so many questions, but I knew I couldn't just walk up to her and ask. Not yet. Not when I didn't have concrete proof. It wasn't about me wanting to be sure. It was about me wanting to destroy the illusion of what we had before confronting her. I needed the truth, and I needed it on my terms. For the next few days, I kept my distance, watching, waiting. The tension in the house was thick, but I played my part, pretending nothing was wrong. Every time she left for work or came home late, I stayed quiet. I had to. If she suspected anything, I'd lose the upper hand. I started doing things differently. I took longer at the gym, stayed out later with friends. I noticed her reaction right away. She'd ask where I was, but I'd brush it off. Just out, I'd say, and I saw the concern flicker in her eyes. The slightest crack in the perfect facade. It made me wonder, was she worried about me? Or was she worried I was onto her? Then, one night, I decided to take a different approach. I told her I was going out for a drink with a friend, but this time, I didn't go. Instead, I parked a few blocks from our house and watched as she pulled out of the driveway, just like before. This time, though, she wasn't heading to her usual spots. She took a different route. My heart began to race. Where was she going now? I followed at a distance, but she was too quick, too careful. She made several turns, and I lost her. I drove around for hours that night, but I didn't see her car again. Was I being paranoid? Or was she getting smarter, more cautious? All I knew for sure was that I couldn't stop. The next day, I found myself in the same position, staring at her phone again. She left it unattended for a moment, and I took my chance. I didn't look through everything, just enough to see a message pop up. A name I didn't recognize. "Can't wait to see you tonight," it said. That was all I needed. It was all real. My worst fears were confirmed. But now I had the ammunition I needed. The question was, what was I going to do with it? The days felt like they were slipping through my fingers, but I couldn't let go. I had the proof now, the confirmation that everything I feared was real. But I still couldn't bring myself to confront her. I wasn't ready to break the silence. I wanted to wait. Wait for the moment when everything would collapse, and I would finally have the upper hand. The text message had haunted me all night. "Can't wait to see you tonight." I knew who it was from, but I needed to know more. I couldn't act on just a few words. So, I waited for my chance. The next few days passed like a blur. She was distant, more distant than usual, but I could tell she was still trying to act normal, trying to maintain the illusion. Every time I asked her about her day, she'd smile a little too wide, laugh a little too loud. It was obvious she was hiding something. But now, I was playing a game too. Every move I made sure it was calculated. I didn't want to slip up. I didn't want to make it obvious that I knew. I needed her to think everything was fine, while I quietly watched the pieces fall into place. It wasn't until the weekend that I had my moment. She left the house around noon, dressed in a way that made my stomach turn. Not because of how she looked. She still looked beautiful, of course, but because I knew where she was going. I followed her again, at a distance, just like the first time. This time, she didn't take the familiar route. She drove in the opposite direction. My heart raced. She parked outside a small apartment complex I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. I waited for what felt like an eternity, but when she finally stepped out of her car, the man from the restaurant was waiting for her. He stood there, his hands in his pockets, smiling as she walked up to him. And then, to my shock, she kissed him. It wasn't a quick peck, either. It was slow, deliberate, like they had all the time in the world. I couldn't look away, but the anger and betrayal I felt washed over me like a flood. I'd been right all along. I didn't stay to watch them go inside. I couldn't. I drove off, my mind racing, my heart pounding. I was done with waiting. I couldn't do this anymore. When I walked into the house later that night, she was there, acting like nothing had happened. But I wasn't going to let it slide. I wasn't going to stay quiet any longer. I took a deep breath, walked up to her, and said the words I'd been holding back for days. "I know what you're doing." Her face went pale. The smile faltered, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the truth in her eyes. Her face went white as a ghost. For a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, like she'd been caught, and the words I spoke had shattered the world she'd carefully built. But then, just as quickly, that panic disappeared, replaced by something colder. Something defensive. She wasn't going to make it easy. I could feel my heart beating hard against my chest, the anger and frustration welling up inside me. But I had to stay calm. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment where everything came to light. I couldn't let her control this. Not anymore. She opened her mouth, and for a second, I braced myself for the inevitable lie, the rehearsed excuse, the "you don't understand" that I was sure was coming. But what she said next left me momentarily stunned. I don't know what you mean," she said softly, almost too softly, her voice wavering just enough to make my blood boil. "What are you talking about?" I let out a sharp laugh, the sound bitter and cold. "Don't play dumb. I saw you. I saw everything." Her eyes darted away for just a second, and it was all I needed. I wasn't imagining things. She wasn't denying it out of ignorance. She was denying it because she thought I'd let her get away with it. "I don't know what you think you saw," she continued, the defensiveness creeping in, "but I'm not cheating on you. You're overreacting." I stepped closer, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to keep the anger from spilling out. "I followed you, Emily. I saw you with him. I saw the way you kissed him. And the texts. Don't lie to me." She flinched when I mentioned the texts. That little flinch was all the confirmation I needed. She opened her mouth again, but this time, no words came out. She looked around, like she was trying to come up with something, anything, that would make this all go away. "Why?" I demanded. My voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence. "Why did you do this? After everything we've been through, why am?" She finally met my eyes again, but there was no remorse, no shame. Instead, there was something else, something I didn't recognize. "Because I needed more. I needed someone who saw me, who cared for me in ways you stopped doing years ago," she said, her voice barely above a murmur. Her words hit me harder than anything. Not because they were surprising, but because they were true. I hadn't been the husband I should have been. But that didn't justify what she'd done. "I wasn't enough for you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "And now you're going to throw everything away for him?" She didn't answer, but the silence said everything. There was no guilt, no apology. Just the cold, hard reality that everything between us had shifted, and I was no longer the man she wanted. I turned away, feeling sick. But I wasn't done yet. "You're right about one thing," I said, my back still to her. I'm done. I'm done playing this game with you. You want him? Fine. But don't ever come back to me. Not after this." Her silence hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with unspoken words and unacknowledged truths. I had told her everything I needed to say. I had demanded the answers I'd been hunting for weeks. And yet, as I stood there with my back turned to her, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really the end. Not yet. She didn't speak. She didn't beg. I expected her to, at least a little. Some kind of pleading, some attempt at salvaging what we had. But instead, she just stood there, her eyes locked on the floor, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. She looked almost relieved, as if she had finally been unburdened, free to admit the truth that had been eating away at her. It was strange how after all this time together, I was still trying to find some sign of the woman I had once loved in her. Maybe I was hoping for something, anything, that could make this feel like less of a betrayal. But the more I looked at her, the more I realized that the woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person I married. "I'm sorry," she whispered after a long pause, her voice hollow, like she was just going through the motions. "I never meant for it to happen like this." I wanted to scream at her, tell her she was lying, that she was just trying to make herself feel better. But I couldn't. Because the truth was, she did mean for it to happen. She wanted it. She didn't just cheat on me because of some mistake. It was a choice. And that was the hardest pill to swallow. I turned to face her, my hands trembling, my chest tight. "Sorry," I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't fix us. You've been lying to me for months, maybe longer. You've been seeing him behind my back, and you still think sorry is enough?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe, but also a sense of detachment. Like she wasn't really there with me anymore. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said softly, her voice cracking slightly. "But I've been unhappy for a long time, and I couldn't keep pretending anymore." I took a step back, my heart sinking. Unhappy? She could have come to me, told me how she felt. We could have worked through it. But no, she chose this. Chose him. "Do you love him?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Her hesitation was all I needed. "I don't know," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Maybe, but I know I don't love you the way I used to. That answer cut deeper than I thought anything could. I turned away again, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. But I couldn't cry for her. Not anymore. I think it's time we ended this, I said, my voice steady, despite the chaos inside. You go, and I'll stay. It's over. She didn't argue. She didn't try to change my mind. She just nodded and turned to leave, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The door closed behind her with a quiet finality, and for the first time in a long while, I was alone. The silence of the house felt like a suffocating weight pressing down on me. I couldn't even hear the hum of the fridge or the distant noise of traffic outside. It was as if the world had suddenly gotten quieter, emptier. She was gone. Just like that, she walked out of my life, and with her, a part of me had gone too. But the worst part was how surreal it all felt. I kept waiting for some sign, some indication that this was all just a bad dream, that I'd wake up and everything would be okay. But that didn't happen. I wandered through the house like a stranger, touching things I used to take for granted. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter where she left it, her shoes discarded by the front door. The things that used to be so familiar now felt alien, reminders of a life that was no longer mine. I didn't want to stay in this house anymore, but it was all I had. I tried to fill the empty hours with distractions, work, friends, anything to keep my mind off the hole that had opened up inside of me. But nothing helped. The days dragged on. It was as if time itself had slowed to a crawl, forcing me to relive the same questions over and over. Why didn't she tell me? Why him? Why did I ignore all the signs? But the truth was simple. She had made her choice. She wasn't the person I thought she was anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the person I thought I was either. For years, I had been blinded by love, by the image of what our life was supposed to be. I wasn't perfect, but I gave her everything I had. And yet, here I was, alone, betrayed, and broken. Days turned into weeks, and I thought maybe the ache in my chest would fade. But it didn't. It only grew. The hurt turned into anger, and the anger into a quiet rage that I kept hidden from everyone. I didn't want sympathy or pity. I wanted justice. But what could I do? What was left to fight for? Then one night, about a month after she left, I got a message. The name on the screen was familiar, but it wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something about it made me freeze. My heart skipped a beat as I clicked it open. The message was brief, almost too casual. Hey, I know you're probably pissed, but I wanted to reach out. I think you deserve the truth. Meet me tomorrow? It was from him, the man she'd been seeing. I felt a surge of something, anxiety, anticipation, anger, all at once. But curiosity won out. I had to know what he knew, what he had to say. I was done playing the victim. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I agreed to meet him the next day. The next day, I stood outside a small cafe, waiting. My nerves were on edge, but I couldn't bring myself to back out now. I had to hear it from him, the man she'd been seeing, the one who had torn my world apart. When he showed up, looking just like any other guy, I had a fleeting moment of hesitation. But as he sat down across from me, I knew I couldn't back away now. The silence between us was uncomfortable. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. I never meant for this to happen, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. Like what? He hesitated, then said, with her. I didn't know she was married at first. My mind raced. She hadn't told him? But then, how much did she really tell him about me? So you didn't know? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Then how did this happen? He ran a hand through his hair. It started casual, you know? She seemed alone. She didn't talk about you much. Alone, the word cut deeper than I expected. Was that how she felt? Was that enough to justify all of this? But I wasn't ready to feel sorry for her. So you knew she was married, and you didn't care? I pressed. No, he said, looking uncomfortable. I didn't care at first. But after a while, things got complicated. She told me things about you, things I shouldn't have listened to. I clenched my fists, the rage bubbling up. So this was a game? You didn't think about me? Or her family? Just your own desires? He looked down, guilt in his eyes. I didn't think about it like that. The silence between us grew thick. I leaned forward, eyes cold. Why are you telling me this now? What do you want? He sighed, looking around the cafe as if trying to find the words. I just wanted to apologize. I didn't know it would go this far, but I can't undo what happened. I didn't need his apology. What I needed was closure, but all I got was a half-hearted explanation. Why her? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. What was it about her? He shrugged, almost regretfully. She wasn't happy with you. She was looking for something. And I was there. I stood up, the finality of his words hitting me hard. I've heard enough. I turned and walked away, a strange mixture of relief and emptiness settling in. I had the answers, but they didn't make anything feel better. They just left me hollow. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling. I didn't know what to do with the truth I'd learned. I had the answers I'd been searching for, but somehow, they didn't bring the closure I expected. If anything, they only left me feeling more lost. Her absence in the house was more profound than I imagined. Every corner, every familiar space now seemed hollow, like the house had lost its soul. I kept thinking about the lies, about how long she'd been living this double life. But even more than that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow missed something, some clue that could have kept this from happening. I buried myself in work, hoping the distraction would be enough. But every time I picked up my phone or walked past the places we'd shared, I saw flashes of her. Her favorite mug still sat on the kitchen counter. Her books piled neatly on the shelf. Even her perfume lingered in the air. It was haunting, like she was still here, just out of reach. A part of me wanted to call her, to demand answers, to scream at her, to make her feel the pain I was going through. But another part of me, the one that had been broken by everything, told me I had nothing left to say to her. She'd made her choice, and I couldn't undo that. Then came the moment I hadn't prepared for. I was sitting on the couch one evening, staring blankly at the TV, when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me urged me to answer. Hello? I said, my voice hoarse, not expecting anyone. Hey, it's me. Came the voice I never thought I'd hear again. It was her. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I wanted to talk, she said, her voice soft and unsure. Can we meet? I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. After everything, after she walked away, after the betrayal, now she wanted to talk? Why now? I managed to say, trying to keep the bitterness from spilling out. After everything, you want to meet? I need to explain, she said, her voice wavering. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I owe you this. I wasn't sure what she wanted from me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear anything she had to say, but something inside me told me to hear her out. Maybe, just maybe, this was the last piece of the puzzle. The meeting was set for the next day, but I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. I'd spent days, even weeks, wrestling with the decision to meet her. Part of me felt like I should just walk away and never look back. But another part, one I couldn't quite silence, was curious. I wanted to know what she had to say. Could there be anything left worth hearing? I arrived at the small cafe we agreed on. My palms were clammy, my mind racing. I kept replaying the words I'd said to her, the confrontation that had ended everything between us. What more could she possibly say? When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Her face had that fragile quality to it, like she wasn't sure who she was anymore, either. She looked tired, thinner than before, her eyes distant. For a moment, she just stood there, scanning the room, before her gaze landed on me. And for a split second, I saw something familiar, something I hadn't realized I missed until now. The woman I married. But that was gone. I knew it. She walked over, and I stood to greet her. We sat across from each other, the awkwardness palpable. There was no warmth, no familiarity between us. Just two strangers, sitting across from each other, with too many unspoken words between them. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said, her voice small. I didn't think you'd want to see me after everything. I didn't answer right away. What was there to say? I hadn't wanted to see her. But something in me was still fighting to understand, even if it was just for closure. Why? I finally asked, my voice quiet but firm. Why him? Why all of this? Her eyes filled with hesitation, as if she was carefully choosing her words. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. I don't know if I can explain it. But I wasn't happy. Not in the way I should have been. I thought I could make it work, that I could ignore the things that were broken, but I couldn't. And I made mistakes. Huge mistakes. I regret it all. Her words felt like a betrayal all over again, but I kept listening. I never stopped loving you, she said, the words almost strangled. But I was too scared to face the truth. I was scared to admit how unhappy I was. And when he came into my life, I convinced myself that maybe he was the answer. He wasn't. But by the time I realized that, I'd already hurt you. The silence between us felt suffocating. She was apologizing, but it wasn't the kind of apology that would ever make this right. You're right, I said, my voice suddenly cold. You made mistakes, but you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we had. She lowered her gaze, nodding slowly. I know. And that was it. No more excuses. No more explanations. There was nothing left to say. She had tried to justify her actions, but I wasn't listening anymore. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I think we're done here, I said, standing up. She looked up at me, her face soft, a faint tear trailing down her cheek. But I didn't feel anything. Not anymore. I walked away, leaving her behind for good. The days after the meeting felt like a blur, like I was moving through a fog that I couldn't quite shake. I thought that after confronting her, after hearing her apology, however empty it felt, that I would be able to move on, to close the door on that chapter of my life. But nothing ever happens as you expect. I kept busy. Work, gym, hanging out with friends, anything to keep my mind from wandering back to her, to the lies, to the brokenness of everything we'd built. But the truth was, no matter how much I tried to distract myself, the weight of it lingered. She was gone, but the ghost of her, of us, still haunted the spaces between my thoughts. One evening, about a week after our meeting, I found myself scrolling through old photos. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just found myself drawn to them, as if they held the key to everything I'd lost. I saw pictures of our wedding day, vacations, those small moments that felt so significant at the time. The smiles, the happiness, everything felt real back then. But now, it felt like a distant memory. The past seemed like a dream I'd once had, only to wake up and realize it was all a lie. It was in that moment that I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit to myself. I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had spent so much time defining myself by her, by us, that I didn't know what to do without it. I needed to change. I needed to move forward, not for her, not for anyone else, but for me. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I needed to find myself again, to rebuild from the ground up. That meant letting go of the past, even if it was easier said than done. So I started small. I made the decision to sell the house. It was the only way I could escape the memories, the places that tied me to her. It was time to let go. But just as I started to feel like I was taking control of my life again, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed with a message. I recognized the number before I even looked at the screen. It was her. Can we talk? My heart sank. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. Her name blinked back at me from the screen, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice in my head, soft and pleading. Can we talk? It was simple, but it carried the weight of everything we'd been through. I had already told myself I was done. I had already walked away. I was trying to move on, to rebuild my life without her in it. But now, she was here again, at least in some small way. She had no right to ask for anything from me, not after everything. Yet, here I was, sitting in front of the screen, torn between walking away once again and responding, hearing her out one more time. I put the phone down and walked away from it. But even as I walked through the house, I felt the familiar pull of temptation. It's like a piece of me, some part one hadn't fully let go of, wanted to know why she was reaching out. Was she really sorry, or was this just another attempt to find some closure for herself? I walked around the house, taking in the empty spaces. The walls felt bare without her. It wasn't just her presence I missed, it was the life we'd built. The plans. The future that now felt completely shattered. But maybe I didn't need her for any of that. Maybe I could rebuild on my own, piece by piece. I picked up my phone again, hesitated, then opened the message. It was almost too simple. Can we talk? No explanation. No context. Just a demand for my attention. I could feel the tension building inside me. I had already moved on, or so I thought. I was starting to feel like myself again. But I knew, deep down, that I hadn't really gotten the closure I needed. I still had questions, things I had buried and hoped would never surface. Maybe this was my chance to finally put them to rest. With a sigh, I typed back, "What do you want to talk about?" The response came almost immediately. "Can we meet tomorrow?" I stared at the message again. My stomach turned. The uncertainty was gnawing at me. Was this some final attempt to salvage something? Or was it just another chapter in the endless back and forth we'd been stuck in? I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever she had to say, but there was one thing I knew for sure. I needed to hear it. The next day, I found myself waiting at a small park, unsure why I'd agreed to meet her again. A part of me wanted to close the door completely, but something in me needed closure, some kind of finality. I hadn't seen her in weeks. The space she'd left in the house had become unbearable, yet here I was, standing at the crossroads of my own emotions. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. She looked thinner, more worn, yet there was still something hauntingly familiar about her. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting nervously around before locking with mine. "Hey," she said softly. I responded with a stiff, "Hey," trying to mask the tension in my voice. We sat down, and the silence between us felt thick. She spoke first. "I know you probably don't want to see me after everything, but I had to reach out." "Why now?" I asked, my voice low, barely keeping the edge of bitterness at bay. "After everything you put me through, you want to talk?" "I owe you this," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "The full truth. Not just the half-hearted apologies." I waited, barely able to suppress the anger and confusion bubbling inside me. She wasn't the same person I'd married. The reality of her betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks, but part of me still wanted to understand. Maybe that's why I was here. "I wasn't just unhappy," she started, her eyes clouded with regret. "I was scared. Scared that I wasn't enough, that I would never be enough for you. And when I met him, I thought he could fill that emptiness." "Why didn't you tell me?" I shot back. "Why didn't you give me the chance to fix things?" "I didn't know how," she whispered, looking down. "I thought, if I found someone else, I could feel better. But I didn't." Her words hit hard, but nothing changed. Nothing would make the betrayal go away. "I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I can't fix what's broken." She nodded, tears falling. "I know. I've lost you." We sat in silence, and for the first time, I realized this was the final goodbye. "I'm done," I said, standing. "I have to let go." She didn't stop me. I turned and walked away, a strange peace settling in. It wasn't healing. It wasn't closure. But it was enough to move on. The days after our final conversation were a blur. It was as if the world had moved around me, faster than I could keep up, but I stayed in place, rooted to the decision I had made. I walked away. I let go. But even in that act of finality, something in me was still struggling, still trying to reconcile the man I once was with the man I was becoming. I sold the house. It felt like the right thing to do, but in truth, it was more about escape than anything. Every corner, every room held memories that didn't belong to me anymore. It wasn't about cutting ties with her. It was about cutting ties with a version of myself that had been built on illusions. I needed a fresh start. A blank page. The process of moving out wasn't easy. It wasn't just the physical labor of packing up my life into boxes. It was the mental and emotional weight of it. Each box I packed seemed to carry another layer of my past. The years we had spent together, the dreams we shared, the future we had once imagined. I had to separate it all, piece by piece, and leave it behind. I found a small apartment in the city. Not much, but it was mine. There was no past there. No reminders of her. The walls were empty, but they felt like freedom. I spent the first few days just sitting in the silence, letting it soak in. The weight I'd been carrying for so long was starting to lift, slowly but surely. I kept busy. Work, gym, reading, cooking, anything to keep my mind from wandering back to her. I'd run into friends now and then, but most of them didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. What could they say? I had lost something that couldn't be replaced. And I didn't know how to explain that to anyone, let alone myself. But then, one night, as I sat on the couch with a beer in hand, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe it's time to stop running. I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but the idea lingered. Maybe it was time to face the pain instead of hiding from it. Maybe the road ahead wasn't about escaping my past, but learning to live with it. The months passed, and the initial weight of everything slowly started to ease. The silence in my apartment, once overwhelming, became comfortable, almost peaceful. I found routines that felt right, working hard, exercising, cooking meals that I actually enjoyed. I spent weekends exploring the city, rediscovering parts of myself I had forgotten existed. I wasn't happy yet, but I was getting there. I was learning to be whole again. I didn't think about her every day anymore. The constant ache had dulled, the pain receding into the background like a scar that wasn't as fresh. The memories of us, of everything we had shared, still lingered, but they weren't as sharp as they once were. It wasn't easy, but I was starting to understand something important. Moving on wasn't about forgetting. It was about accepting the past and learning from it, without letting it define me. One day, while scrolling through my phone, I saw something that made my stomach twist, a photo of her. It wasn't recent, but it was still a reminder of the person I used to know. For a split second, I felt a pang of regret, of wondering how she was doing, what she had become. But I didn't let myself linger. I deleted the photo and kept scrolling. I didn't need her in my life anymore. I started dating again, cautiously at first. There was a woman I met at work who seemed nice, someone I could talk to without feeling like I was carrying all that old baggage. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but I was open to the possibility. One evening, as we shared drinks and laughed about nothing in particular, I realized something. I was free. I wasn't weighed down by the past anymore. I wasn't defined by the betrayal, the heartbreak, or the lies. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. It was small, but it was real. I wasn't whole yet, but I was getting there. And that, in itself, was a victory.